Hi, virtual students. We are continuing our Unit 4 notes. We're on Part 2. We're going to be in this inflation portion of your notes. I'm going to speed through these, so if you got to pause the video eventually to write stuff down, by all means, do it. But I am going to go through fast. All right, we're going to start you out here with a daily blog. Go ahead and get these answered. All right, for number one, hopefully you're putting something along the lines of increased demand, maybe a decrease in supply, a shortage of natural resources or whatever. And then the third thing that you could have put is that the government prints more money. So those are three main things, very broad, right? You could obviously be more specific. Can prices going up be a good thing as long as it's super, super stable? Okay, so historically speaking, inflation has increased by about 3% per year for the last 100 years or so. That might be a little bit high for an average, probably 1 to 2% is probably a little bit more what a target inflation rate would be. But it usually shows that people are spending money. And in fact, when prices go down overall in an economy, we actually see recessions. We actually see recessions occurring. So Great Depression, 2008, 2009, prices going down overall is actually a bad thing for the overall health of the economy. All right, so just to kind of show you here some percentages. All right, we're going to take the change. So in this case, it's 6 over the original, right? So 6 over 100 equals a 6% change. 6 over 60 equals a 10% change. And 306 over 300, 6 over 300 equals a 2% change. So notice what I did. All the changes were equal. All the changes were equal to each other of $6, but based on what that original price was, it changes that percentage. And so we're going to look at some of that stuff as we're going today. Okay. So you've got three types of inflation that we want to talk about. We've got what's referred to as creeping inflation. That's the normal inflation I referenced a second ago. On average, since about 1914, so 100 years or so, is actually 3.4%. And like I said, that's probably a little bit high for an average of what we would want to be. Okay, so anyway, that's normal in the United States. We also have what's referred to as hyperinflation. That is when inflation gets so bad that people race to spend their money. And so, for example, like if you knew that gas prices were going to go up by like $1 every day for an extended period of time, you would go buy gas all the time, right? You'd buy gas every single day so you could save as much money as possible. And if it was happening with every product, then again, people are racing to spend money as quickly as they can, and it creates some big problems. It happened in Germany back in the 1920s and 30s, and obviously led to some bad things into their leadership into World War II. The term for when prices go down is deflation. So those are the things that you need to know. This is a chart here of the unemployment rate. So unemployment is blue, okay, and inflation is red, okay, and it's also called consumer price index. We're going to define that here in a second, and you can see that pretty regularly. You can see that when unemployment goes up, meaning people don't have jobs, well, they don't have money either. So we see inflation kind of start to go down. It's not necessarily perfect. It's not a perfect relationship because there's other factors in there besides people simply just buying and selling stuff. Like the supply chain and things like that. But you can see, like, especially in recent history since the 1980s, inflation goes up when unemployment goes down, right? And so they kind of crisscross this way. And again, it's not perfect, but there is that inverse relationship between the two that is pretty noticeable when you look at a graph. And so we'll talk about unemployment next, but kind of keeping that in mind that at no time is the economy absolutely perfect. Right, the economy is either going to be getting better or getting worse. We're never really going to count it perfect. All right, so the inflation rate is the percentage increase or decrease in the price level of goods and services. And there's some different things you can look at in terms of keeping track of this stuff. We're not going to spend a ton of time on it, okay? And every month, the Bureau of Labor Statistics comes out with their report. And you can see that this is the inflation. This is the average for the year, but they do it every single month throughout the course of, well, for the last 107 years or so. I believe it started back in 1914, and they've been doing it since. And so, just kind of a couple periods of note. As we mentioned, the Great Depression, prices going down. You can see prices decreased during the years of 1931, 32, and 33. And so those are challenging times for economies. 2009 prices dipped just a little bit, but we were going through that recession, and we can kind of see that. So anyway, overall, through the last, the course of the last 20 years or so, things have been pretty stable in terms of that stuff. Just to show you a period of inflation in the late 70s, you can see we had some gas price issues and some supply of gasoline stuff, oil, and you can see some big inflation there. All right, so that's that percentage increase. Now, again, we can see the percentage increase on this graph. It's the same graph we just looked at, except that I took out the unemployment graph. You can see we get into a recession type thing, these gray bars, prices tend to go down, right? Into the 70s, we had some oil issues. Prices went up. Recession happens, prices go, and you can just kind of see how that relationship happens with those recessions, which are represented by these gray bars there. Now, you and I, we usually don't talk in terms of like, oh, gas prices went up by 8% today. We don't necessarily do that. Now, on a graph, it's super easy, right? Okay, when was the economy doing bad? Well, that's a high inflation. That's no good. Low inflation, we've kind of talked about that's bad. So you can kind of point things out when we use percentage change. But we also like to talk like, hey, listen, last week gas prices were 250, this week they're 285. We kind of like to talk and think in ways of like whole numbers and prices, right? And so anyway, the way that we can do that is with this consumer price index, and it measures the average change in the prices of basic goods and services. And there's like 300 of these basic goods and services that the Bureau of Labor Statistics keeps track of. Okay, and so they try to weight it different ways. Like you spend most of your money on rent or housing. You spend a big chunk of it on maybe your car payments or whatever, and they try to weight it in a way that is as accurate as possible, which doesn't necessarily always mean the same for everybody. Um, but they chart these things. And again, my chart's going to look just like very similar to what we just looked at because it's the same group. Um, and you can see that, you know, it's a little bit easier to wrap our head around, that something cost, oh, in the year 2010, something that cost $218.05 now costs $267.05. And so you can kind of see, what that is, and you can wrap your head around it a little bit more rather than saying, oh, 3% per year. How do you figure that out? They started way back in 1914 again. They started with just an even $10. And so 10, $10 in 1914 is the same as $267 today. Okay, so anyway, those are some things that you have to have memorized. The challenge and the reason why we don't necessarily just use that data and make it what we always use is because if we look at it on a graph, it's always going up, right? And so there's no necessarily like, okay, when are things bad? Well, we know things got bad in 2019. You can see a little dip in, the consumer price index, which you can see it. But, as it steadily rises, it's difficult to find those spots on the graph. It's much easier to see those percentages and say, oh, we were bad shape there, right? Or down here, sorry. And work with it that way. So kind of using both statistics for you. Okay. Go ahead and answer your questions for the second part here. All right. So when you buy a house, all right, you're going to probably have to take a loan. Maybe not. You may not have to take a loan out. But when you buy a house, you obviously are going to need a significant amount of money. And there's a few different characteristics that you'll want to take into account. So I'm just going to put in here, I don't know, $150,000. And again, this is how much I'm going to borrow. So there's different things you can do. If your house costs $200,000 and you can make a down payment of $50,000, you'd have to borrow $150,000 or borrow $150,000. There's a whole bunch of different ways to kind of get to how much money you have to borrow. But either way, okay, we're going to change this interest rate just to 4. All right. Now you have some options. Sometimes people want to get a mortgage for 30 years. Sometimes people want to do it for 15 years. The faster you pay it off, the less total money you're going to pay. Okay. Your monthly payments are going to be lower for a long time, but you're going to pay more money over that time period. So let's just change this here to 15. So go ahead and take a look. 257.8804. If I change it to 15, I'm going to save myself about $50,000, but it's going to cost me about $400 a month to be able to do that, right? And so there's different things you can take advantage of. If the interest rate changes, you're going to see these numbers change pretty significantly as well. So if my interest rate goes down to 3%, obviously the total cost is going to go down, the monthly payments are going to go down, and it plays a pretty significant role. If it goes up, obviously the opposite's going to happen. So, that's something that you can kind of take a look at and try to take advantage of to one day borrow money to buy a house. Those are, again, this isn't necessarily a finance class, so we don't talk too much about the specifics of loans and things like that. But those things are affected by the interest rate, okay, or inflation. So if inflation's really high, banks have to set their interest rates really high so they can make money on those loans. And so those things are affected as well. Okay, so some of the causes we kind of mentioned as we've gone through it. We've got the demand pull, okay, so people make more money and they buy more stuff and it drives prices up. Um, you've got the cost push. This would be the side of things where the price of inputs into products is increasing, and that can include labor, that can include natural resources that make prices increase because it costs me more to produce my product. And eventually, there's going to be this what's referred to as this wage price spiral, meaning that, okay, as people get raises, they make more money, they buy more stuff, and all of a sudden inflation occurs because of that increase in demand. And then they get back to like even, and then they need a raise again, and then so it creates that constant demand for more money to try to stay ahead and try to earn more um, than you were before. Okay, so some reasons it's not perfect. Again, using that consumer price index, they call it this basket of goods. And this basket of goods, not everybody buys everything in that basket of goods. I might live in, a big city and not need a car. Well, the price of a car is included in there, and so you can use substitutions to kind of avoid higher prices in different places. Sometimes people buy in bulk to save some money. Um, Sometimes we can't keep track of what's new. So, 10, 15 years ago, a cell phone wasn't necessarily a necessity. Okay. And I'm talking about 15 years ago, as in like 2005, not a necessity. I would say as of 2021, a cell phone is almost a necessity, right? Where people have to have it. And so it's hard to keep track of those things. And then sometimes things start lasting longer or last shorter or whatever, and quality, again, just things that may lead to some inaccuracy of the value of a product. Okay, so the bad news is for inflation is obviously as prices go up, I can't buy as much. A fancy way of saying that is I lose purchasing power. People that get hit the hardest are people that are on fixed incomes. And so people that collect income from the government, or people that collect Social Security, same thing. It's just another form of payment by the government where they can't go work harder to make more money. They're going to be hit the hardest. So if prices go up, I can't raise my income because this is what the government's paying me, right? Prices go up, I can't buy nearly as much. All right. We have higher interest rates. We mentioned that. And if we can't trust the economy and we can't trust that stability, we lose some efficiency, and people kind of rush to buy stuff. There's been a few instances in the course of the last 25 years or so where there's a fear of a gasoline shortage, and that idea that gasoline's going to run out or prices are going to go really high really fast, and so people rush to buy gas, right? And gas stations run out of that gas and they raise prices, and it makes the prices go higher faster than what they probably needed to if we didn't have that fear of prices going up and rushing to buy that stuff that we need. Okay, so anyway, that's my thoughts for unit 4, part 2. Email me with questions. We'll talk soon.